Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Tabitha Hardy, and I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Graduate Education here at IU Indianapolis. And today, I have one of my great friends here from our university library, Dr. Jamaica Piper. Now, today, we're going to talk about a really serious subject, literature reviews, okay? So, for me, I think when I talk about literature reviews, it's really one of those subjects that students don't really like to address. Whether you are doing a small paper for class or you are doing your thesis or dissertation, at some point you're probably going to have to do a literature review. So, Dr. Piper, can you tell us a little bit what is a literature review for real?
All right, so a literature review is just like a focused analysis of a collection of sources related to a given topic or within a specific domain. There are different types of literature reviews actually. For most of what you're going to be doing, it's going to be something called a comprehensive, also known as a traditional literature review. And basically, this just means that you're going to be pulling any and all relevant sources related to whatever question or topic you're doing. If you are more like in a health field or maybe further along in your career, you might be doing other types such as a systematic review. The key difference between these two is systematic reviews invoke a particular protocol. So there's a method for exclusion and criteria that's kind of established, and it's a little bit more rigorous in terms of trying to limit bias in subject information collection.
Oh, that's really interesting. So if I just Google what's out there on skateboarding in the 19th century, I mean, am I going to get a whole lot of literature on that subject area?
Probably not.
Probably. I don't even know when skateboarding was invented, but.
Probably not. So I'm going to back up. So this is probably jumping a little bit ahead, but one of the key things when you first start a literature review that I think a lot of us don't really think about is how do we find sources in the first place, right? I want to stress this, and this might be a bit of a heretical position, but you actually can use Google Scholar to find resources. Keyword scholar. So you can actually create a link between your Google Scholar page and the IUCAT system, and you can easily search within databases that way, and it's really easy to do. We have a couple tutorials on that, and if you can't find those tutorials, go ahead and give me a shout out. My email is piperg@iu.edu, and I'm very happy to walk you through that. But on the topic of how to find sources, okay, don't want to blow your mind here, but you want to use keywords, and the keywords that you're going to use are actually going to be pulled directly from whatever research question it is that you have. So let's say in the example, if you're looking for skateboarding in the 19th century, well, I have some more questions for you. But just starting off with that, you would want to try to break down first, when did skateboarding as a term emerge? So there's a little bit of trying to figure out the chronology of that term, because you might be able to say, well, skateboarding actually doesn't become popular until I think the 1960s. So, the whole 19th century thing, maybe a no-go. But if you are someone who's studying more about like the tool, the idea of the skateboard probably has been around at least from the late 19th century. And so you have to figure out, what did they call it? Mm-hmm. This is probably getting a little bit more in depth than you wanted to know, but my point still stands that when you're searching, being able to identify keywords, understanding that names change. So we see this a lot when it comes to people and how people identify. So this is going to matter a lot if you're doing primary research as well.
Very cool. Okay, great to know that. Now, I know that we have at the school what are called subject area librarians. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably an underutilized tool also.
Yes, very much
but can you talk to us about subject area librarians and how they can be helpful with our lit reviews too?
I would like to think so. So I think Dr. Hardy may have mentioned this, but I actually am the education and humanities librarian. What that means is if you are in my subject area, so if you're in the School of Education, or really if you do anything in the humanities, you can come and I'm able to assist you with navigating either databases or with any sort of research focused questions. So as this pertains to literature reviews, let's say you are struggling to find sources, which I know it happens to the best of us. I can actually help you navigate that really easily. It would just involve you setting up an appointment and coming to talk to me.
Oh, that's really easy. We could do that. No
Yes.
problem. I know how to set the appointments up. That's great. So I know you've done this work a lot. Are there common mistakes that people make that you want to help us, not make, things that we should avoid trying to do? You already mentioned one, thinking about me doing Google versus Google Scholar.
Mm-hmm.
So
I am going to talk more about like the mindset of sources, okay? I think a lot of us get frustrated and we're quickly to say like, I'm finding stuff on my topic, but it's not, so like, it's not in education, it's in psychology, it's in counseling. And then we say, I'm not going to use that literature. That's a huge mistake. You have to think about how you want to bring that into your paper. So what I would do, I would use that and be able to say, this is the proof that there's a gap in the literature. So that's how you sort of are able to bring in what's existing to show what's not there. The other thing I see, again, outside of the fact that people aren't consulting maybe your librarians at the start of your literature process, I think is information management, getting organized. So some of you guys might have heard of this thing called the citation management. That would be like your Zotero, your Mendeley, your EndNote, just to name a few. And what these are tools that can help us, one, with pulling in PDFs, and two, with exporting out reference lists. Outside of that, though, I think that another thing you can do is, if you don't want to use a citation management, if you just want to be able to pull PDFs, you can actually create folder systems on your machine. So literally just create a folder for the project and then create subfolders. This will allow you to more easily manage as you're trying to analyze within the individual PDFs. I think that that's a really underutilized way to approach it. So that way you don't get so overwhelmed when you're confronted with maybe 150 different articles that thinking I have to analyze all this.
yeah, that's a great point. It's really good to kind of think about how you can organize things up front versus, oh my gosh, I have all of this stuff. What am I going to do with it? Yeah, great point there for sure. So I know that this campus has a lot of resources that students can use. Are there some that maybe are underutilized and we should be using them, but we're probably not?
Probably a lot of things. So I know some of you guys probably get used to using maybe one database, or maybe you don't use databases at all. My tip, and this is something just for you to think about, if you're searching within Google Scholar, you might run into a lot of paywalls. Stop what you're doing, copy the digital object identifier. This is called the DOI. And you can actually plug that back into the library homepage, and 8 times out of 10, we probably actually have a free addition to that source. That would be one thing. The other thing you can also make sure you're doing is, if there's a book, and I know we kind of forget about books because who needs a whole thing, but books have chapters. And so what you can also do is search for titles that you might find online, search within the IUCAT system, and then you can actually, if we don't have it, you can use Interlibrary Loan to request it. I'd say it takes up to 3 days, and that's at the very minimum or very much maximum. But we have a quick turnaround, so you can get that in your hands pretty quick.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you that when I was a grad student here, that interlibrary loan, lifesaver for sure. And this morning, I was looking for an article from the Washington Post, and I clicked on the link, and they were like, "No, you need to sign in. You need to pay this much." I was like, I'm not gonna do it because I know I can go to this library and then get and access our free digital Washington Post, right? So definitely great tools there from our library. So that's really exciting to hear. So I wanted to ask you too. I don't know if students really know about the basic steps of a literature review. I know we talked a little bit about setting up your search, but as you kind of get into the organization of things and get into citing your sources, might one really go about doing all of those parts?
Citing of sources, that is such an interesting thing. So the first thing I would do when it comes to steps, if I think about it as a step process, once I have them in the folders and I'm analyzing, I use something called a type of graphic organizer, if you will. If you don't know, think about going back in elementary school when you had to do like the Venn diagrams or the KWL charts. There's this thing called the synthesis grid. This is a pro tip. If you take the synthesis grid and you set it up, and by set it up I mean like list the authors that you have to analyze, and then I would set up a section so I can directly pull quotes. And then as I'm pulling quotes, I would make sure that I am using my citational, so my in-text citation for APA or in-text citation for MLA, etc. And then I would also make sure I have a space to where I can jot my thoughts down. Because remember, the difference between a literature review and an annotated bibliography is analysis, right? You're doing synthesis plus analysis, which means that I'm taking multiple sources and figuring out how they are put together. And then I'm adding in my argument and my rationale. And so if you're able to set it up using like a synthesis grid, you're able to sort of streamline the writing process. You can also make sure you have a section like this is what I agreed with, what I disagree with. And I think that will help you with speed lining up the writing. And also if you're tracking the in-text citation while you're doing that, will make that process a lot easier as well.
That's really cool. I never really thought about like doing a synthesis grid to kind of make sure that everything aligns and that this makes sense and this makes sense, and then bringing in my flair to it. So very cool. Thank you for sharing that. That is a pro tip for sure. So I want to ask you about software tools. Are there specific software tools that we should be using? I know you mentioned EndNote, you mentioned Zotero, and I know that the library also does citation management workshops, right?
Yes, we do. We do. And since I've already mentioned, like, again, that's called the citation management softwares. The other thing I'm going to mention, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, AI has been such a controversial thing, but I'm going to tell you a couple things. There is a few AI-enabled tools that are specifically created for literature reviews or with literature reviews in mind. Of course, I am a big supporter of OER and open access materials, so I'm just going to tell you about the free one. There's this thing called Rabbit Research. If you don't know, you can kind of create an account, and more importantly, you can link your Rabbit Research to your Zotero library if you're using Zotero. And what it allows you to do is first to import whatever folder that you're working on for the project, and based off of that project it runs a sort of neural path collection thing. I don't know, I'm not an AI person here, but basically it pulls together other resources that are on the same topic. So this is also a way to find and identify new sources that is streamlining the process. The other thing that you can do, as you guys know, we have an institutional license to Microsoft Copilot that is tied into our Microsoft Exchange account. So technically, if you're able to pull your notes into OneNote, you can actually pull all your notes in there related to your literature review and have it generate themes and or summaries for you.
What? Okay, no, I did not know that. That's very cool. Also, the rabbit one is rabbit, not rabbit bunny, right? Okay. Yes.
It's rabbit like a bunny.
Oh, okay, cool, good.
Yes, RABBIT.
Good to know.
I should have clarified, not like Wolverine or something.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. Okay, so we talked a good bit about literature reviews. What tips, any advice would you have for our listeners today? What do they really need to keep in mind as they are working on their lit reviews?
I think the first thing to keep in mind is the literature review is a sort of evolving process. That's why we do them. You don't, most of the time, don't start off knowing anything, and that's perfectly fine. You will be refining it. Does that make sense? So as we are progressing in literature review, new pieces of information are added. Maybe our question gets a little bit shifted, and that is a perfectly normal process. And I would say that we want to make sure that we are giving ourselves enough time to integrate different literatures as needed.
Yeah, and you can set up your searches like that too, right? Mm-hmm. So you can set up a different search to give you whatever you want on a weekly basis, or if a new topic pops up on a daily basis,
so
right?
So you actually, within both Google Scholar and within our databases, you can set up email search alerts. Again, that's something, if you don't know how to do, just reach out and we're happy to show you how to do that. So that would be one tip, I guess, for finding more. And the other tip I have is to play with your search strategies. I'm circling back to that question. I didn't think about it. Mm-hmm. So I know maybe some of us are used to Boolean. That's when we put two terms together and we use and in the middle. We can also do combined searching. This is maybe like, intermediate step of searching, where we look for multiple terms and their alternatives together, and we're able to sort of create a more narrow focused source search that way.
Cool, very nice. The other resource I wanted to mention is, if you need time to write, space to write, mm-hmm. we have our writers workshop for grad students that goes on twice a week, so you can utilize that time and that space to write. And the person that is over it actually works in our university writing center, so they might be helpful also. Hey,
I'm just saying,
don't get much better than it, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I want to thank Dr. Piper. Thank you so much for joining us, talking to us about lit reviews. Hopefully lit reviews now won't be so super scary for you, and you can do this. We know you can. You got this. Yes, let's do it. All right, lit reviews.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.